There we go.
Hmm.
Got it. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you all on board again to listen to the rabbi on the whole subject of Purim. And it's a very new subject to me. It seems like this is a very joyous and happy occasion, and I'm sure the rabbi will let us know why that is the case. And I think without any further ado, Rabbi, I might just hand over to you to get this morning's sessions underway. I've been looking forward to it because this Sunday I'm going down to visit the very honoured to have been invited by the ambassador to join in with Purim
Excellent.
celebrations
Yeah.
down there. So you'll be able to give me a bit of background, so I won't go down there totally ignorant.
Yeah, I've just seen Ian join as well.
Yeah,
But
Ian's coming
that's
down as
excellent.
well.
So you'll be able to show him a bit of prior knowledge and preparation for Purim. But certainly, as we'll see, it's one of the latter festivals that were created by the rabbis. It's one of two. It was Purim and Hanukkah. Therefore, technically, it does not have a biblical mandate. But having said that, the actual text of the story was incorporated in the Hebrew scriptures after some debate in the Talmud. So this is actually the last book that they canonized in the 24 books, as opposed to Hanukkah. Whilst we celebrate that, it was not canonized. So today I will just touch upon the story, the characters, the Jewish customs, but perhaps most importantly, the continuing relevance of the underlying message of Purim for today. But I think really there's some universal messages that we can all learn from the story. I thought it'd be simplest. This gentleman here will just give us an overview of the story, and then we'll unpack it after that.
The Purim holiday takes us back to a time in history when genocide against the Jews was attempted some 2,400 years ago. It marks the Jewish people's rescue from the plot of Haman, a high officer of the Persian Empire and advisor to King Ahasuerus. Haman's rage was incited by a single Jew, Mordecai, who refused to bow before him. Rather than seeking revenge against Mordecai alone, Haman plotted against the entire Jewish people. Haman gained permission from the king, Ahasuerus, to do as he pleased against the Jews. He legislated a pogrom that would wipe out every Jew in the empire on a single blood-soaked day. Haman cast lots to determine the day when he and his minions would destroy the Jews. In leaving this date entirely to chance, Haman's message was unmistakable. The Jews who believed in the providence of a beneficent God would be subject to the blind whim of fate. A casual roll of the dice would be the instrument that seals their end, while the God of the Jews would stand helplessly by. Haman's challenge came at a crucial point in history. His provocations were a test. Was God still relevant in the post-biblical age when open miracles were no longer common and prophecy was coming to an end? In the end, the Jews were saved from Haman's plot, but pointedly, they were saved in a non-miraculous way. In the events of Purim, serendipitous happenings conspired to bring about unexpected results. Alone, each of these events could be seen as nothing more than a fortuitous coincidence. But taken together, they weave a miraculous chain of events orchestrated by God. King Ahasuerus holds a spectacular 6-month feast in the capital city of Shushan. It just so happens that when Queen Vashti refuses to obey the king, he has her eliminated. And when a global beauty contest is held to replace her, it just so happens that Esther, a Jewish girl, is chosen. When palace guards plot to assassinate the king, Mordecai, Esther's relative, happens to overhear and foil the plot. One night, it just so happens that the king can't fall asleep. He asks for the book of records, which just so happens to open to the page recording Mordecai's long-forgotten act of loyalty. At that moment, Haman happens to approach the king for permission to hang Mordecai. Instead, Ahasuerus tells Haman to dress Mordecai in the royal robes and parade him on horseback through the streets of Shushan. The heroics of Mordecai and Esther was in recognizing God's hand and taking the necessary action, no matter how challenging it may be. When Esther fears approaching the king uninvited because one could be killed for such presumptuousness, Mordecai tells her it is certain that the Jewish people will be saved one way or another. God promised it will never be destroyed. The only question, Esther, is if you will rise to the challenge God has given you, enabling redemption to come through your hand. This is your big moment, the reason for which you were born. At the climactic moment, Esther hosts a banquet where she reveals that she is Jewish and exposes Haman for planning genocide against her people. The king is shocked and orders that Haman be hanged on the very same gallows he prepared for Mordecai. Ahasuerus grants the Jews the right to defend themselves on the 13th of the month of Adar, the day of the planned attack. The Jews defeat their enemies, including Haman's 10 sons, who, like their father before them, are hanged on the gallows. Mordecai enacts an annual holiday with feasting, giving gifts to poor, and food to friends. Appropriately, the holiday is called Purim, literally, lots that are cast, commemorating how Haman's worldview that everything is determined by chance was overturned by the Jewish ideal that God is present. Chekhov once said that if a rifle lies above the mantel in Act 1 of a play, it had better go off by Act 3. The mark of a good playwright is that no plot element is superfluous. Everything ultimately has a role, and the same goes for the great playwright in the sky. Everything we humans do has its role in the play we call life, but not necessarily in the way we imagine. The book of Esther does not mention the name of God, and that's the whole point. The message of Purim is that God is here even when he doesn't seem to be. God's presence in history is felt not just when the sea splits or when divine fire descends upon a mountain in full view of the entire nation. God is present in the everyday workings of life and history as well. We all have choices to make. That is how we cast our lots in life. But what happens after we make the choice is no longer up to us. Purim demonstrates that God is in complete control, even when he remains behind the scenes. Without the fanfare of miracles, in the space between human choice and the ultimate result, the master of the universe will yet have his say.
Okay. Right, so let's just unpack this a little bit, just to get a little bit of a better understanding. The actual word Purim is a Persian word that means lots, in other words, from the word lottery. He actually, as it says in the scroll of Esther, he cast a lot, of which is the most propitious day to annihilate the Jewish people. And the lot fell on the 12th month. And for him, this was significant. It was significant that the 12th month is the last of the Jewish months. It was significant that on the 7th of Adar, Moses passed away. When the rabbis analyzed what he did was they pointed out that he was foolish because on the day that Moses died, it was actually the day of his birthday. What we mean to say is Haman had a linear view of the Jewish people, that there will be a beginning and an end. The end of time has come with Adar. The end of their great leader has come, and now the time has come for their end. But Jewish history invariably is not linear, but it's cyclical, because on the day Moses died, that was actually the same day he was born. Immediately after he died, yes, he died physically, but his teachings were carried on by Joshua. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the astrological signs of most of the months are linked back to Jewish themes. And those of us who follow our astrology, the month of Adar is Pisces. And again, the message, it's two fish that are inverted. And this reflects what happened in Purim. It was a topsy-turvy cyclical nature of events. The day of destruction worked out to be a day of celebration. The day where the very gallows that were prepared for Mordecai, Haman was hung on that day, and he himself was killed instead of Mordecai being killed. He was turned. So there was a cyclical nature of these events, and that's why that symbolism is there of the fish turning. So let's just look at some of the characters. So Barry, just you could just nominate somebody or say it yourself. Barry? What happened? John, do you want to read?
Yeah. Oh, you got me now?
Barry's there, go for it.
Yeah. The king of Persia, Iran, when his queen Vashti. Are you getting an echo there with me or not?
No.
That's all right. I've got two computers going here.
You're at Emu Gully, not Echo Gully.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing. He refuses to entertain guests at the king's feast. He banishes her. Young women from throughout the kingdom are brought to the king. He chooses Esther as his new queen. When the king's main advisor, Haman, tells the king that the Jews are disloyal, he agrees to Haman's plan to kill all the Jews. But in the end, Mordecai's loyalty and Esther's bravery help the king to see that it is actually Haman who is more of a danger to the king. Ahasuerus allows the Jews to defend themselves from Haman's soldiers and orders Haman to be hung on the gallows intended for Mordecai.
So I think in English it's Xerxes was one of the Persian kings. The Jews are currently have been exiled from the Holy Land by the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar. The Persians overran the Babylonians, and the Jews are finding themselves there now in exile, in between the destruction of the just after the destruction of the first temple. He asked his wife actually to dance naked in front of his friends, so she refused. So off with her head. Obviously not very politically correct on a number of levels. Okay, just go for the next one for Esther.
Who we got there? Michael, can you take it away?
Yeah, sure can. Esther's cousin, Mordecai, who is Esther's cousin, who raised her after her parents died. He saved the king, and he saves the king's life when he overhears a plot against the king.
There was
Mordecai.
there was one version of events that he actually was married to her as well. But certainly she was a cousin, an orphan. He raised her, but some suggest he actually was married to her. Yeah.
Mordecai also incurs the wrath of Haman by refusing to bow to him, which leads Haman to plot to kill all the Jews of Persia. Mordecai advised Esther to conceal her Jewishness when she first becomes queen, but then encourages her to reveal it at just the right moment to save her people. At the end of the story, Mordecai is rewarded for his faith and wisdom.
Okay. Anybody who doesn't want to read Haman?
I'm happy to start. Haman, the king's vizier or chief advisor. Haman wanted everyone in the kingdom to bow down to him, but Mordecai refuses. This leads to Haman to decide to kill all the Jews. He convinces the king to allow the plan. Only the intervention of Esther prevents Haman from carrying out his plan, and Haman is instead hung on the very gallows that he had erected for Mordecai. Haman is a direct descendant of Agag, the king of the Amalekites.
Amalekites, yeah.
Amalekites, sorry, yeah. This is symbolic of all the enemies of the Jewish people. So they would be linked into Hamas.
Quite. We'll talk about at the end, but yeah, exactly right. What displays there's hatred and there's hatred. If one looks at the biblical narrative very briefly, Moses concludes in his final address that we should always remember the Egyptians fondly because they gave us food for 200 years. You see, the Egyptian hatred, if one looks at the narrative, Pharaoh perceived they would become a threat in the event of war. So therefore, there's reconciliation with the Egyptians. Haman, however, who is from the Amalekites, simply attacked the Jewish people immediately after the Exodus. They did not impede the Amalekites. The Amalekites just simply couldn't tolerate what was happening. The rabbis give the example, there was a hot bath, and a fool jumped in and says, look, it's not really all that hot. I mean, even though he burned himself, in a sense, he cooled the bath down, the perception. And this is what this is what Haman did as well. I mean, Haman was the prime minister. Haman had 10 sons. He had family. Haman was wealthy, except he had this irrational hatred for the Jewish people, for Mordechai, because he wouldn't bow down to him, that ultimately destroyed himself. I think Sarah's here, so she's definitely got to read Esther.
Your turn, Sarah.
She there? I think I can. You there? One of the other ladies.
What about you, Tamara? Are you there?
I'm here. I'm worried about pronouncing things correctly, but anyway. So Esther, hero of the Purim story, or I'm not sure how that was pronounced, a young Jewish girl living in the capital city, Shushan. She's chosen by King
Ahasuerus, yeah.
to be his new queen. She doesn't tell him, however, that she is Jewish. Finally, when the lives of all the Jews of Persia are in danger, Esther reveals herself, and the king agrees to save the Jews in order to save his queen. Esther is an icon of faith and bravery in Jewish tradition. When Mordecai asks her to go to the king and plead for her life and the lives of all the Jews in Persia, she's terrified because to approach the king without an invitation meant a possible death sentence. But she agrees to go, understanding that she is uniquely placed to be able to help. As Mordecai explains to her, perhaps you've become queen for just such a moment.
Mm. So that last point we'll elaborate at the end, but certainly the king was not entirely a rational person. He has his wife beheaded because she wouldn't dance. The story actually begins by a 180-day party, 6 months party for the people. So not exactly a normal character. So just to sum up what we've said.
Purim is about throwing away your mask. There's an ancient custom to wear masks on Purim. When Esther became the queen of Persia, King Ahasuerus didn't know that she was Jewish. She masked her identity. But at the crucial moment when the Jewish people were threatened by Haman's genocide, she removed her mask and stood up to be proudly counted as a Jew. By doing this, she saved the Jews of Persia from annihilation. Don't think that our enemies will be persuaded that we are good people by listing the vast contributions the Jews have made to civilization. The hatred of the anti-Semite is illogical, and something that defies logic cannot be reasoned with. The Jew hater hates us because we are the filthy rich and the filthy poor, the bastions of bourgeoisie and rootless cosmopolitans. We are the communist and we are the capitalist. The only thing that the Jew haters of the world can agree about is their hate. We will never ingratiate ourselves amongst the nations of the world by aping them. Never was the cause of assimilation stronger than in 19th century Germany. The more the Jew pushes to be like everyone else, the more everyone else will turn around and remind us that we are different, sometimes with murderous results. Don't expect the nations of the world to love us. But if we're proud Jews, proud of our Torah, proud of our heritage, if we exemplify the Torah's description of us as a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, then the world will give us respect. The Medrash, the oral Torah, says that when God was giving us the Torah at Sinai, everything in the world came to a standstill. The nations of the world, fearing that God was sending another flood, sent word to Bilam, their prophet, to ask what was happening. Bilam replied with the words of Psalm 29 that Hashem was not bringing a flood or destruction, but Hashem oz li'amo yitain. God was giving Oz, which means the Torah, to his people. To which the nations of the world replied, Hashem Yevarech es amo b'shalom. May Hashem bless his people with peace. When we are proud Jews, when we throw away our masks and become a Mamleches Kohanim, a kingdom of priests, a Goy Kadosh, and a holy nation, then the whole world will proclaim, Hashem Yevarech es amo b'shalom. May Hashem bless his people with peace.
One of the answers to anti-Semitism is actually not to hide one's Jewishness, but quite the contrary, to be proud of what you believe and really disseminate those biblical values. So in terms of the customs, yeah, Barry, somebody can.
All right, Tony, how are you going there? Unmute.
Right. The custom, the Megillah, the Book of Esther. Esther requested of the Sanhedrin that these events were to be written in a scroll to be read every year on Purim. This scroll was called the Megillah, Book of Esther, was the final book to be canonized in the Tanakh. The name of Hashem is not written in the Megillah, signaling a new era. Hashem's not doing miracles, but acting through the natural order. A genuine Megillah must be written by a scribe on a parchment.
Yeah, as you can see on the clip, the Megillah scroll is they're not as large as a Torah scroll. They can be quite small, or maybe in the old measurements like a foot or to 15 inches. Actually, I just traveled from Melbourne to Sydney, and one of the synagogues ordered two of these scrolls from a local scribe in Melbourne, and I brought them up on the plane for the congregation. But again, they have to be handwritten. They're written by a human being with a quill, special ink on parchment. What would a Jewish holiday be without food? As the adage goes, they tried to kill us, we won, so let's eat. So besides the festive meal, one of the unique foods, and those of us going to Canberra for the ambassador, I'm sure he's going to have some hamantaschen, so here you can give him some further insights as to the meaning. So it actually comes from a German cake, which was in German or Yiddish, Mohn is poppy seeds. So a Mohn-taschen means a pocket of poppy seeds, if you will, a little cake with poppy seeds in. But it's a play on the words Haman-taschen. So Mohn is also a play on the words Haman. But also when Esther was in the king's palace as queen, she kept kosher. So the tradition was that she ate seeds. That's another allusion. At a deeper level as well, the hamantaschen traditionally has three corners representing our three forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who protected the Jewish people. As we mentioned, one of the customs is to wear masks. And again, in a sense, everybody was wearing a mask there. Esther hid her identity. Mordechai didn't fully reveal who he was. Haman, who was an anti-Semite, had said he had the king's best interest in heart. In a sense, God himself was hidden because his name is not mentioned in the Megillah, which will elaborate. So how do we, Purim is Sunday, so how do we celebrate the occasion? On Saturday night, we hear the reading of the Megillah in the synagogue. Sunday morning, we hear the reading because he tried to divide the Jewish people. One of the best ways is to come together with unity. Therefore, we are obligated to send two gifts to friends of food. We give money to charity, and we have a festive meal. So really those four things are the primary observances. I think what's important as well is really to draw out some universal messages of the festival, and this one's been quite prevalent in what we've said. Barry?
All right, Sandra. You've got unmute.
Okay. Themes. Look for God's hidden hand. In the entire scroll of Esther, there is no clear mention of God. The name Esther means hidden in the Hebrew. Megillah means revelation. Esther is revealing a powerful hidden truth. Esther is urging us to wake up, see God's hidden hand in your everyday. It's about the little moments. He is directing and watching over us.
Yeah. And I think all of us really in our own personal lives can see the hand of God working. This is Rabbi Twersky, a fascinating individual, just passed away recently. He actually was, besides being a scion of a great rabbinic family, he became an expert in addiction in America, and he set up a number of clinics there called the Gateway Clinic to wean people off alcohol and drugs. One of the great stories I used to share in the synagogue about him was that he once had a Catholic priest that had an alcohol problem. And after weaning him off the alcohol, the priest then had a further problem because he had to celebrate Mass on Sunday with wine. So the rabbi reflected, we also have to have wine to begin the Shabbat and the Yontif, but we are allowed to substitute grape juice, which is a non-alcoholic beverage. So apparently he wrote into the Vatican and he got a dispensation to have grape juice for Sunday Mass.
We celebrate Purim because it was a salvation, rescue from a threat of annihilation. Right? But we also had another episode, and that was Passover, where we were under danger of annihilation when we were trapped between the oncoming Egyptian army and the sea. Right? And in Passover there was a miracle. Right? God split the sea and we went through. Okay, that was a miraculous salvation. There's nothing miraculous about Purim. Right? What happens in Purim is the king has a prime minister who's an anti-Semite. Right? There is somebody in the king's court who is a prominent Jew. This prominent Jew has a niece who is chosen as the queen. Oh, first of all, something happens that the king got drunk, and in his drunken fury had his queen executed. Right? I imagine that a couple of people in shul the next day were talking about, hey, do you hear what happened in the palace? King got drunk, had his queen executed. I said, oh, don't bother me with that. You know what? I'm not interested in that. This is part of the miracle. Right? And he's dismissing it as that doesn't apply to me. Right? Okay. Then Esther is chosen as the queen, and she doesn't tell who she is, doesn't tell her source. And then Mordecai the Jew overhears a palace intrigue to assassinate the king. Well, there's also a lot of times that there are palace intrigues. Right? Mordecai overhears this, right? And it's recorded. Nothing miraculous about it. Right? The king can't sleep, right? They read him the Chronicles and he realizes he never rewarded Mordecai for it. Right? Nothing happened there that was miracle. It was not the Red Sea being split. Right? But what it did show is that God was manipulating things in order to bring about our salvation. Right? And the beauty of Purim is it's the handiwork of God in nature, not in miracles. Right? And I think that points out something that people don't often think about, and that is the natural miracles that occur before our eyes every day. I have a doctor friend who's a world authority on infertility. He's not a particularly observant person, a Jewish person, but he's not observant. And he said to me, I was looking at the microscope, looking through the microscope at a fertilized ovum, a single cell. And I realized that from here on in, all that cell is going to get is carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. And out of those elements, that cell is going to build a human being that can write the symphonies of Beethoven, that can write the plays of Shakespeare, that can write the philosophy of Aristotle and Socrates. Right? 100 billion cells multiply interconnected, a liver, a kidney, whatever. At that point, I realized there has to be a God. Right? Now, what happens is nature is all around us full of miracles, right? But we don't realize it. And what we take from Purim is an example. Right? It was a salvation, and we celebrate it as a miracle that happened in nature. And it should serve as a model for us that to realize miracles are always happening in nature. It's just that we don't recognize it.
And I think certainly all of us in our own lives, if one reflects, we're blessed with miracles every single day. The other profound message which comes out is from Esther. Barry, perhaps one of the ladies.
Okay, Pam, can you unmute?
I can. Have to get rid of that. Okay. You have a unique life mission. Amen. Esther is told by Mordecai that she must speak to the king and plead for her people. She replies, "That's impossible. Everyone knows the rule of the kingdom. If you enter the king's chambers without his beckoning, you will be killed unless he extends his golden scepter." "I haven't been called for 30 days, she relays to Mordecai. Mordecai's reply gives Esther direction. You cannot remain silent. Who knows? It might be that you were chosen to be queen for just this moment.
Yes, my colleague, Rabbi Jacobson, will just elaborate upon this soon, but it's also
She said, I always, every year on Purim, I cry for Esther. I said, why do you cry for Esther? She says, the war is over. Everybody goes home. Where does Esther go? She's stuck with Achashverosh. Yeneglik. Everybody is drinking and partying, meloif, megate, mishalachmanas, matanas lavyoinim, and she's stuck with Achashverosh, a shikir goy, an inebriated monarch. He said, what a tragedy. What a sad story. I cry for Esther every year. Now we have to ask ourselves this question. If there was a Jewish woman, a graduate from Sarah Schneer's Beis Yaakov in Krakow, or in Lodz,
the Jewish Girls Academy,
in 1938, would be summoned to the Berghof, to the residence of Adolf Hitler Yamach Shemai in Bavaria. And she would know that as a result of her work, her impact, the Holocaust would not take place. The war, September 1, 1939, Yud Zayin Elul Tofresh Tzadik Tes, would be avoided. And the 6 million Jews sent to their gas chambers, including 1.5 million children, all of their lives would have been spared. How would this woman feel about her fate? Would she die a miserable woman or the most content person in the world? Esther left her people, left her nation, remained in the palace, but till her last breath, Esther knew that because of her, every single Jew of her generation was rescued, and the Jewish people will remain an eternal people.
She actually had a son, I think, Darius, who he then permitted the rebuilding of the second temple. Then finally, I think another important message is that we should be firm in our beliefs. Barry?
All right, we got another volunteer. I lost my screen here. Pam Colbert, is she there? I'll take it away. Don't bow to Haman. Mordecai refused to kneel or bow down to Haman. Every generation has its Haman. Any force that threatens your ability to connect to your soul or tries to cool your passion for what is right and truth is Haman. There will always be people who will belittle your desire to be better and live higher. There will be those who mock your standing for truth, for your people and the land of Israel. Don't crumble, don't bow, never lose your passion for goodness. Stay strong as Mordecai did.
It's another powerful message, as all of us here appreciate, that we have to stand strong in our beliefs. And the other important message here is one of unity, because one of the accusations that Haman said to the king, there are people who are dispersed and divided, and unfortunately we're definitely divided as Jewish people, but the success of her mission, Esther, was in uniting the Jewish people, bringing them together in prayer and fasting. And therefore, this is sort of plays itself out as well in the festival, where there's a communal celebration, there's giving of gifts. In other words, joining together in unity. And in unity is strength. And I think that's a very important message. Rabbi Mervis here just to briefly highlight the theme.
The Megillah is a tale of two families. It is clear from the biblical text that Haman didn't act in a vacuum. His family were his partners in his evil plan and its intended implementation. That is why 10 of his sons were hanged on the very gallows that were built for the Jewish people. The Midrash tells us that Haman had 360 advisors, and chief of them all was his wife Zeresh. She was the one who led the others in recommending to him that the gallows be built in order to hang our nation and thereby to annihilate us. The Targum describes chillingly how while the gallows were being built, Zeresh stood alongside the builders, playing a musical instrument and rejoicing in what she believed was just about to happen. Contrast this with a different family. In the saddest of circumstances, a little baby girl was born. Her father had died after her mother fell pregnant, and her mother died in childbirth. She was Esther, and she was adopted so lovingly and caringly by her cousin Mordecai. And how moving it is to read how when Esther was in the king's palace, Mordecai would come every single day to the palace gates to inquire after her welfare. The end of the Megillah is very revealing. It's full of accolades to Mordecai. We read, Mordecai Hayudi, Mishneh LaMelech Achashverosh. Mordecai the Jew was second only to Achashverosh. V'gadol LaYehudim, great for the Jewish people. V'ratzui l'Rov Echav, popular amongst the majority of his brethren. Doresh Tov Li'amo, he only wanted the best for his people. V'dover Shalom L'chol Zaro, he got on peacefully with all his descendants. Isn't that extraordinary? The Megillah is our most comprehensive and important biblical textbook about Jewish survival. But the bottom line of it all, the concluding note, is about family. Mordecai got on well with all his descendants. Mordecai was a great family man. What's so important about that? But actually, I believe that there's a profound message here for us. You see, sadly, we have needed to fight against the Hamans of this world time and time again. And thanks to the help from God, we have prevailed. When it comes to Jewish survival, in addition to building strategies to counteract the influence and the acts of those Hamans, if we want to overcome the threat from Haman-styled families, we need to raise Mordecai-styled families. Because thanks to having strong and wonderful Jewish families, we have all the more chance of guaranteeing our survival. I wish you all Purim Sameach.
It's actually chilling, the contrast of the two families, of one celebrating death and the other one celebrating life. On a personal note, some of the most moving videos that I've seen of young couples getting married there in Israel, some even there in Gaza under these most horrific circumstances. The Torah, in relation to, I think, Ian's observation at the outset, we know who Haman is today. Well, the verse, the Torah does say, God wages war against Amalek throughout the generations. So unfortunately, his seed or his ideals, and this ethos continues, and it can be no clearer than today. One of the most incredible podcasts I've heard, actually, some of you I know listen to Caroline Glick. So she just did an interview with John Spencer. He's an expert a professor of urban warfare at West Point Military Academy in the United States. So he just goes through how ethical Israel has been in this conflict compared to other urban conflicts throughout the land, and certainly avail yourselves to listen to it personally. But what is unique about this conflict, not only that you're an enemy above ground and below ground, but what it's unheard of in history, where the purpose of any army is to protect her people. That's what armies are there for. So this also goes against the grain, because Hamas is not there to protect its civilians. In fact, it utilizes them as human shields. And in fact, the more deaths there are of their civilians, the happier they are, because they can take advantage of this politically. I mean, so great is the hatred of this people. And just to conclude with this final clip. Okay, so on that, certainly a great story, a great food, but certainly some powerful messages as well that are relevant to all of us. God's continuing benevolence, that like Mordechai, we should be proud of who we are and our values. And certainly the message of Esther is that each one of us have got a unique and special mission and role to play upon this earth, and we should do our utmost to fulfill that. Perhaps, John, if you just stop the recording.